Chuck Norris had already spent years building himself into a serious martial artist when he met Bruce Lee. He knew what speed looked like, he knew what power felt like, and he knew that experienced fighters did not impress easily. But Bruce Lee was different. When the two men trained together, the difference was not simply that Bruce was fast. It was the way he used speed, without appearing to waste movement, without giving away his intentions, and without making his opponent comfortable. Norris would later become one of the most respected martial artists and action stars in the world. But before Hollywood made either man famous, Bruce and Chuck were part of a much smaller martial arts world in California. Bruce had arrived in America with a different way of thinking. He respected traditional martial arts, but he questioned the idea that a fighter should be trapped inside a rigid system. He wanted techniques to work because they were useful, not simply because they had been passed down. Chuck Norris had his own foundation. He was deeply trained in traditional Korean martial arts, had competed successfully, and had earned a reputation as a formidable fighter. That made their relationship particularly interesting. This wasn't a beginner meeting a master, it was two highly skilled martial artists studying each other. And Bruce Lee had a habit of making people reconsider what they thought they knew. During training, Bruce could move from stillness to action with extraordinary speed. But speed by itself wasn't the secret, the real difference was timing. A fighter can move quickly and still be predictable. Bruce tried to eliminate that problem. He focused on distance, positioning, reaction, economy of motion and striking before an opponent had time to fully respond. To someone watching casually, it could look almost effortless. But for another trained fighter, that was precisely what made it difficult. There was no unnecessary movement to read, no dramatic preparation, no wasted motion announcing what was coming next. And that became one of the things that separated Bruce from the image of the traditional martial arts performer. He wasn't interested in looking powerful, he wanted movement to be efficient. Norris and Lee also shared something else. Neither treated martial arts as a finished subject. They trained, experimented, exchanged ideas and learned from each other. That point matters because later stories about Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris sometimes became exaggerated through retelling. Some popular anecdotes describe exact challenges, exact exchanges or spectacular moments that cannot always be independently verified. The broader historical picture, however, is clear. They knew each other, they trained together, and Norris had enormous respect for Bruce Lee's abilities. That relationship became particularly important because Bruce's approach challenged conventional assumptions. He was physically smaller than many of the martial artists around him, yet he understood something that had little to do with size. If you could control distance, timing and reaction, you could change the entire equation. Bruce was constantly searching for that advantage. And Chuck Norris was exactly the kind of martial artist who could appreciate what he was seeing. There was no need for Bruce to prove himself through some theatrical showdown. The training itself was the test. Every movement exposed a question. Could a technique be made faster? Could a movement be shortened? Could a fighter react before an opponent completed the action? Could traditional training be adapted to something more direct? These were the questions Bruce kept asking. And they eventually became central to the philosophy that would be associated with Jeet Kune Do. What makes the story of Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris so compelling is that neither man needed the other to become legendary. Norris already had his own achievements. Bruce had his own vision. But when their paths crossed, two different martial arts minds had an opportunity to exchange ideas at a crucial moment in their lives, and perhaps that is the real lesson behind the famous stories of their training. Bruce Lee's greatest advantage wasn't simply that he could move fast, it was that he refused to stop asking how movement could become better. He treated martial arts as something alive, something that had to adapt, something that could always be questioned. Chuck Norris didn't just meet a fast martial artist, he encountered a man who was trying to rethink the entire way a fighter understood movement, and that idea would eventually become far more powerful than any single punch or kick. Because Bruce Lee's lasting legacy was never just how quickly he could move. It was the idea that the martial artist should never stop learning, testing, adapting, and searching for what actually works.